TiE helps a young entrepreneur in fostering and mentoring what needs to be done as a business, and that could be in form of capital, it could be in form of training, it could be in form of education.
What I would say about TiE is full of very interesting people. There's a lot of diversity in the interests and skills of the people that are there.
They have brought a discourse to the entrepreneurial world that doesn't appear anyplace else.
There's very sincere interest in creating an environment for innovation and inclusion and inspiration and support.
TiE is mentorship to budding entrepreneurs or someone who wants to scale their company.
TiE has always been an excellent place for me to network and also to find out what's happening in technology and the world.
TiE for me is a way for me to give back to somebody else who could use that same help.
The things that I think TiE does is that's terrific is bringing out, on a monthly basis, speakers and people that stimulate the thinking and education.
The events, the panels, the stimulation that you'll get in terms of new ideas is important, plus the people that you're going to meet and interact with are some of the great people in town.
I like to help other entrepreneurs, budding entrepreneurs, form a company, to get funding, to launch their companies, help them with, positioning, who their customers would be, and things like that.
Every time I think that I have learned everything, I'll meet some bright guy at TiE who really makes me feel dumb because he knows a bunch of stuff that I don't know. Keep learning. And keep getting educated. TiE is the best place to do that.
I think the other area that TiE could really scale up is in bringing investments to these budding entrepreneurs. Some of these entrepreneurs have great ideas, but they need to be connected.
Much of what we've got here is bio-driven, or it's component-driven. And I believe that the next phase of innovation that's going to be crucial to humanity is where technology and humanity connect, and that's at the application layer. I'm hoping that just like LA's a hotspot for entertainment and Silicon Valley is a hotspot for social media, that San Diego can become a hotspot for the next phase of technology.
The region needs to get entrepreneurs involved in the day-to-day workings of government so that government can be more transparent, more technologically sophisticated, and provide better services to people.
And we seem to be very bashful about what we've accomplished here in San Diego, and I think we have to let the world know about that.
TiE is one of the best kept secrets that people just don't know about it, especially as a young business that may look for some mentoring or guidance or even capital. People don't know where they are and who to look for, so I am doing my best to get the word out there in the community that here's an organization that's almost 30 years old that nobody knows about.
TiE can help San Diego have an image, have a persona that is viewed as an outstanding place to not only live and raise kids, but also build strong teams and innovative products.
Artificial intelligence, genomics, and cellular, wireless, that this is the ground zero for that. And if you're not here providing those funds, you're probably missing out on a bunch of unicorns maybe.
Good evening. Welcome. My name is Sandeep Varma. I'm president of TiE Southern California, and I'm here to start out this great year with TiE. So I want to thank each one of you for being here. I want to tell you, TiE, I am very proud to be associated with TiE. TiE is made up of 100% volunteers. And at this moment, I'd like to take a moment, if I could ask all the volunteers of charter members and committee members from TiE to stand up for just 1 second. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you, would you give them all a big hand? And I am truly, truly proud to be associated with these great people around us. So I'm here to get our program started here. And I'm very excited. I also want to take a moment to tell you a little bit about what's coming up on next month's event. So TiE puts on an event every month. Next month, where the topic is the future of cloud computing and data storage. And we have Microsoft, Amazon, Equinix as part on a panel to talk about the future. So that's going to be at Kenobi Martin next month. So on your handout, if you haven't signed up yet, please let us know right away. So with that in mind, I want to get our program started. We have a tremendous lineup for you today. To talk more about EvoNexus, it is my honor to introduce Rory Moore, the CEO of EvoNexus. Rory.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Okay, I echo just exactly what he said here about the volunteers. We have many volunteers at EvoNexus over the years from TiE, both in Irvine and San Diego, and they number in the dozens. We also have investors from TiE, so thank you very much. Let's get started by showing you a brand new video from EvoNexus. And this video was created by a high school student. A senior in high school created this video with his own camera system at EvoNexus, completely edited. Okay, let's roll the video. Where's the video? Oh, okay. Every day I come to work, I'm surrounded by entrepreneurs that are betting everything on their new startup, totally devoted to their dream, and are the new companies that are going to build the next generation of important large companies for the region. To me, EvoNexus is like an elite university, and the graduates are companies. Just like great universities prepare individuals to face the world, EvoNexus prepares companies to face the world.
IRA uses Google Glasses connected to an app, connected to an independent real-life agent to bring information and independence to blind and visually impaired people.
So this is my second time at EvoNexus. First time was with EcoATM. We've come back now with our new company called MEM Computing and hope to get the same benefits and to end up being a successful graduate as well.
We're developing a new non-thermal metal 3D printing process. We joined EvoNexus because they have been instrumental in getting us integrated with the San Diego community.
We became part of EvoNexus because EvoNexus has a lot of resources, mentors, and synergy with other companies.
Water Pigeon's core function is to help utilities reduce the cost of doing water metering. By integrating a camera and a battery into our lid, we can actually read and operate exactly as an AMI system would do, but with about a third the cost of what a traditional solution is.
My partner Leilani and I are going to revolutionize the professional salon hair color industry with the first computer-controlled hair color dispenser and mixable suite of colors.
Our company is developing a new class of wind turbine designed for distributed power generation. It's going to bring low-cost, affordable power to people that live in remote regions.
Many investment connections are made in the hallways of EvoNexus. EvoNexus is the most important thing happening in the innovation economy in Southern California.
Terrific. Okay, where's Marty Cooper? That hair coloring machine is right for you. Okay. As we said, our results speak for themselves. There's what's happened really in the since 2010, when we admitted 3 companies, including EcoATM and a few others. Over 1,700 startups have applied to enter EvoNexus, 1,700. And we've selected a handful, really, 186 out of 1,700. over 70% actually receive funding and raise money while they're in the incubator at EvoNexus. 1.2 billion, over 1.27 billion in funding and outcomes. And we've had 21 acquisitions, so 21 companies have been acquired, and that's just in the last 4 years. So terrific outcomes, and it's due really to the volunteers. Just like TiE has great mentors and volunteers, as do we. We do it on a very small staff, and without you, many of you in the audience, we couldn't do that. Okay, this is a great quote that John Major gave us years ago, and actually not so long ago, it happened recently. But John was on our board. He was our chairman of the board back then. When Admiral Davis and I started the incubator, we went to John to get his support. And at the time, he was chairman of Broadcom, but also was very important to the local economy here with what he does. He backed it with our board members. We launched it. And this is a quote from John we got recently. And it really is heartfelt, and it tells you exactly what happens at EvoNexus when you are admitted to our incubator. Coming up, a little plug for Demo Day. We're doing a first ever Demo Day with a co-produced event. This one is not going to be just produced by EvoNexus, but San Diego Venture Group and Tech Coast Angels. So to ensure that we have investors in the audience, we've got Tech Coast Angels and Venture Group making sure that happens. So we hope you come to Demo Day. We've got some very excellent companies presenting, probably some of the finest we've ever had in Demo Day. You'll find companies that you may want to help, mentor, or better yet, invest in. So thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Rory. You know, I really like his passion about working with startups, and every time I talk to him, it's just amazing. Couple of things I would like. In your handout, you all have a comment card that we will be collecting, and we're going to be doing a raffle at the end. And I would like to ask each and every one of you to fill this out for a feedback for us, but also I would like to ask each one of you is what you can do for us, what you can do for TiE. So please take a moment, and we'll be collecting that at the end. I also want to take a moment to thank QUALCOMM for having us here today. My next introduction is Nakul Dukan. He's the head of QUALCOMM Automobile, and it is quite an impressive. I was just talking to him. Since 1995, he's been with QUALCOMM, and quite impressive. I'm anxious to hear what he has to say also on here. So with that short introduction, would you please welcome Nakul from QUALCOMM.
Thank you, Sandeep. Can you all hear me okay in the back? Okay. Good evening. Thank you very much. Very warm welcome to all of you. Like Sandeep introduced, I've been at QUALCOMM a long time, and I look at QUALCOMM as the ultimate startup. I think that culture is still very much there. So all of the CEOs in the audience, a lot of respect for you in terms of what you are doing in your day-to-day lives. I will give you a very quick overview as to where we are headed in the next 10 years or so. This is mostly maybe to give you a sense of where the company sees the future, and I think a lot of you that are working in this space in the San Diego region will connect to this. I think you all know the history of the company has been in connectivity. We have been modem innovators, and I think as we look at the future, compute and connectivity have become very central to every single thing that we do. Huge investments in mobile, but very rapidly expanding into a large number of other markets. If you see the breadth of IP and technologies that we invest in to build the engine that is mobile and then expand beyond into a variety of different businesses, I can share with you my experience within our small team in automotive at QUALCOMM, where we essentially started the business of about 5 years ago, entering the automotive market, really leveraging what we had on the mobile side, but building a business that allows us to build a portfolio, entering into a variety of new spaces, infotainment, telematics, moving over into autonomous driving. One thing that I think is common as a thread, as a platform across technologies, is the amount of overlap, the amount of reuse that exists as you can start to build the base IP across a variety of different use cases, a variety of different applications, is something that we've been able to take significant leverage very significantly. Where we are focused on over the next, I would say in the next 2 years now, is 5G. We expect 5G to start to become the focus of wireless innovation, starting off as early as next year, and then expanding over into a global footprint over the next 3 to 5 years. And this is going to drive innovation, it's going to drive scale across a variety of different spaces. Automotive is where we've been spending a lot of time, but if you look beyond, look into IoT, into mobile compute, into networking, into RF front end, the scale at which the business is expanding in terms of the variety of different applications, the variety of different use cases that the fundamental mobile technology is able to enable is pretty unprecedented. If you think about this in the context of the serviceable market that we are focused on, so I think the mobile market is well understood, well documented and researched. But as you start to think about that same platform enabling a variety of adjacent businesses, where we are spending a lot of time is to focus on a couple of different things. One is, how do we build products all the way down to IP, all the way down to silicon and software that has applicability beyond just the core business that we focus on? So anything that we would do in the mobile space, how does that find its way very quickly into automotive, into networking, into mobile compute? The software that we develop for a lot of these applications, how is that investment something that is not focused on just one single application, but really expanded beyond into a variety of different spaces? In the context of the conversation today about scaling startups, our experience is that, obviously as organizations get more complex, a lot of these things become extremely difficult to put into practice. So it's straightforward to talk about how you actually develop this on a roadmap, but how do you put it into practice is a very different conversation. And at least what we have learned is that the distance between the customer and the product is something that is really important. Being able to listen to what the customer is asking for and translating that into how you implement your roadmap. We are a large company now, and the reason we are successful is the pace at which we can move. And what that really means is if you can have your go-to-market teams, the folks that are talking to your customers, listen to the feedback that customers provide, because a lot of this is changing constantly. None of these opportunities were really known to us, I would say, even in the last year or so. There is so much change that has happened in a lot of these spaces because every single independent IP block is changing at a very rapid pace. So being able to take that feedback and influence the pace at which you develop your roadmap, have the ability to be able to pivot, to flex, to be able to change direction, I think is super important as we start to go after these different markets. For us, the challenge is how do you do this on a day in, day out basis across a $250 billion or $150 billion market. But I think if the plan is rooted in the right foundation, in the right architecture, I think it can be done. And I think we are actually seeing a lot of success. We've announced this in the last month or so. We're seeing tremendous success in showing how the recipe of investing in mobile and then expanding into adjacencies, how do you actually put that into practice and show results to the bottom line? I'm sure to some degree or the other, this applies to each of your businesses, but I would just say that probably the most important piece outside of the people is to be able to figure out how do you find processes and customers and reduce that distance. I have a bit of a plug for our ventures folks, and I actually work with this team. I know a lot of you have interacted with, I'm sure Rory and team have talked to our ventures folks for a number of years. What's very interesting about this team is they are extremely focused on where the innovation is happening. So if you look on the right-hand side, the ventures team is constantly adapting what they focus on. They're a sensor in terms of getting us very quick real-time feedback in terms of where the market is headed. So things that we miss, we are able to find out through the sensor arm in the ventures team. And what you see on the right-hand side keeps changing on a regular basis depending upon where we focus. They are very broadly focused geographically. We've been doing this for over 17 years now. And a lot of very successful exits. I can just give you a very quick set of highlights. I think this is probably only in the last maybe year and a half, but we've had very successful investments in Xiaomi, in Retail Next. ClearMotion was a very interesting company out of Boston, out of MIT, where they developed this. I'll give you a bit of a sense of this because it's very interesting. They developed an AI-based sensor for suspension for the vehicle so that it would actually be able to predict where the road is going to have potholes and adjust the suspension of the vehicle dynamically. Really interesting guys that are doing these things. So if you think about the breadth of areas that we are focused on in terms of venture investments, really broad. And I think the one thing that we find constantly now is that there is an element of AI in a lot of these applications, almost constantly. So being able to bring AI to the edge and coming up with very innovative solutions that may be not clear, not completely well understood. I think ClearMotion was a very interesting example of that. Various investments in 2017 across a wide variety of spaces, all the way from drones to machine-to-machine, education platforms, bike sharing, particle. We've made some investments in various IoT applications. Box is a services solutions provider that does a lot of work in software development. So, please reach out. I think you all know various folks at QUALCOMM, I'm sure. Feel free to reach out to me. We are very keen to support the San Diego startup community. And welcome. I'll turn it back over to Sandeep.
Thank you, Nicole. I've got to get you over to EvoNexus. We have a thermal imaging company you need to take a look at for automotive. Okay, I'm going to introduce our moderator for our panelists, and this is all about how to grow your company, scale your company. As I say, how do you grow your company beyond two guys and the dog, right? When the dog may be the best part of the company. There's probably very few companies in the world that was disrupted more. Very few companies have been disrupted more than Kodak. I mean, if you look at Kodak years ago, it was the brand for photography. Everything you did involved film, involved what Kodak had. And we have a guy here today that saw it all happen. He was there with Kodak in the early years, almost 20 years with Kodak, watched an entire industry change. So he's seen disruption firsthand. What happened at Kodak. He came to San Diego a few years back, and he's been a terrific volunteer and mentor to many startups as they try to build their companies to disrupt industries. So who better to teach these entrepreneurs how to disrupt an industry than this guy? So he'll be up here presenting the panel. The panel consists of individuals that in some ways have gotten beyond that two guys and the dog, scaling their companies. They haven't scaled to a Qualcomm, but they've gotten to raising several rounds. They've created hundreds of jobs in San Diego. And we hope that one of these one day will become a public company. But all of them started really at EvoNexus, and we're really proud of what they've done. And I think you'll learn a lot from them today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator. 20 years at Kodak. Devang, where are you? Come on up.
Thank you, Rory.
Now, my first question for him, he left Kodak about a year before the iPhone launched, wasn't it? 2 years before?
Probably more like 3 years before.
3 years. Could you conceive of what happened with photography?
No, we actually, at the time I was in Hollywood, working on digital cinema, believe it or not. We were digitizing the film business. And the smugness of the Kodak culture, the imaging culture, always thought the consumer preferred higher quality. And they always kind of ignored that consumer really didn't care that much about the higher quality. They cared about some quality, but not the highest end. And so that's where they got stuck.
And the number of photographs that have been taken on the camera phone far exceed any photographs ever been taken on film.
But most people may not know this. The digital camera was invented at Kodak. The sensors and some of the algorithms for image processing that you have in your cell phones, they're all Kodak patents.
Right.
Most of them are now expired patents, right. But Kodak generated quite a bit of disruption themselves. But when you have, and this will be part of the scaling discussion, when you have a cash cow business, and if you're a manager of this business, it is hard to let it go. And very few people can do it. Steve Jobs was one of them.
Right.
So that's the challenge. But that's a whole different discussion. We'll have another panel discussion if you guys want about that.
Okay. Well, let's get your panel up here, so bring them on up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Rory. So thank you, everybody, for coming. This is awesome. This is nice to be up here. Rory, I see why you like this place so much. We organized this event because scaling is a big challenge that most startup entrepreneurs don't realize until they hit the point when they have to start scaling. They've taken investor money, and now they have to deliver. And so we've picked some of the best entrepreneurs in San Diego that I know to come and talk about it. So first up, I'll invite Mark Bowles over. Who doesn't know Mark Bowles? He is like a Jedi master of startups. He's done so many startups. He's got so much wisdom. And he's so humble, you wouldn't even know he's a Jedi master until he shows you a couple of tricks up his sleeve. So hopefully he brought his sleeve full of tricks today. So come on up, Mark. Next up, I'll invite Kian. Kian is somebody I met when I first started attending EvoNexus events. And Kian had just started out Independa. And I was just amazed that somebody from a corporate world can come and do a startup, because I was in similar boat. And I thought that would be an impossible task. Well, that was about 8 years ago, I think, and he's going fast and strong. So please welcome Kian Sane. Next up is Suman. Suman has a most amazing company that he started only a couple of years back. And, you would think a problem that he's about to solve or has solved could be solved with an app or something, something on a smaller scale. But Suman went after it with everything, and he'll tell you about it, and it's very impressive. And I think his name should be changed to Superman instead of Suman, because this guy, I just found out when I was interviewing for this panel, he just had a baby. He moved into a new house. He moved into a new office, graduating from EvoNexus. And so he's doing all this over the holiday period while running this amazingly successful startup that he's got going. Please welcome Suman. So thank you guys for being here. So let's see. I think we'll start with give us a little introductory elevator pitch about each of your businesses, and maybe add to it a little bit about why you started it, and then tell us what stage of scaling are you in that elevator pitch. Do you have a Series B, Series C? how much have you raised, if you can share that, revenues, unit of sales, employees, so we understand where you are, and then we can get into the discussion. So we'll start with you, Keon.
Great, thank you. It's great to be here. I have to put a huge plug in for EvoNexus as one of the companies here. I know it was a seminal moment for us, so anyone who has a choice or option to be with them, I'd encourage you. So Independa is a software subscription that allows our elderly greatest generation to age wherever they want to be, in their homes and in senior living communities, and essentially staying where they want to be longer, safer, more comfortably. And we leverage a TV in doing that instead of a tablet or a computer, so there's no passwords or software updates or battery issues with tablets and so forth. Well, the problem that we solve is remote engagement and care. So we don't have enough beds, enough doctors, enough hospitals, enough taxpayers or children to take care of our elderly. And that's true not just in the States, but all over the world. So the reason it was interesting to me was there was a major opportunity globally, not just in the US. And you can't really leave your loved ones alone if they're alone and need some care. And you can't be with them all the time. You can't hire a doctor or a nurse. So the high-tech, high-touch solution we thought was necessary and needed. And when Rory talked to me about, let's do a diving catch, I'll never forget. Where are you, Rory?
He's right there.
Yeah, so exactly. So he said, let's do a diving catch and looking to get Independa inside EvoNexus. And if he remembers, back then people were laughing at the concept of having technology for the elderly. So, but here we are, and I think that's a big deal for all of us to be concerned about, and there's a lot of activity in that market. In terms of where we are in stages, I'm really excited to share that we're going from, let's just generalize, a few hundred licensees last year to probably around 30,000 licensees over the next 18 to 24 months. We signed a major game-changing deal with a national organization. We're also rolling out in hospital beds as well as in home care, all at the same time. So I heard the CEO of MyTech once say they were a 10-year overnight success. And so a lot of where we are is just being able to keep going to the point where you hit the big time. And so we're right in the middle of that in 2018. I'm really excited about that. We are closing our C round as we speak. We've raised close to $16 million. And we have LG as an investor. In fact, that happened when we were at Evo. But also we're bringing in at least another large strategic household name in this round as well.
Thank you. Mark?
So I'm not currently doing one monogamous 80-hour week startup like I've been doing for the last 25 years. So I'm investing, and I did start one, and we just closed and had the celebration today, a $17 million round. It's stealth, so I can't talk about it.
Well, that's 17 million. That's pretty good.
Yeah,
good
so
number.
I'm working there, but not full-time, and I did some IP. And
So we're going to talk about EcoATM more than your current
Yeah, well, I'll talk
gig.
about that tonight. But I do want to mention something I'm doing that I think is interesting to the crowd. And I just talked about it for the first time last night publicly. I've been working on it for a year or so with Tom Tully and Neil Centuria. We have begun filming a television show. It's to showcase San Diego startups. And it's similar to Shark Tank, except that it's local SoCal. We include Orange County and LA. And a couple of twists. We do, it's local companies, but instead of doing the silly on a stage presentation in front of a bunch of people sitting in chairs, we do it more like VCs do. So we watch, it's called VCs in a Van, and we have a big black Sprinter van, and we watch the pitches on the television as we go to the company. And then we go in and we can see any kind of product. It could be software, healthcare, a service, an outdoor product. So it gives us flexibility, so it's mobile. And then we also invite the viewing audience to invest as well. So we give them a couple of weeks and they can go to a data room. And so if we decide to invest, we invite the crowd. And then we also crowdsource things for the company, resources like we need access to a buyer at Crate and Barrel because it's a Crate and Barrel product, or so forth. So we've got some episodes in the can. We just got distribution, and so it should be on the air in March here in San Diego and LA. So,
wow. Where's the black van? I didn't see it out in front.
We have to rent it. We didn't buy one. Okay. It's not successful yet, so we got to
still a startup.
Manage the capex. So anyway, I'm working on that. And I want to give a plug for and tell a story here about EvoNexus. So when I was starting EcoATM, we were in a coffee shop like you're supposed to be in, brainstorming, and at the table next to me was the Admiral and Rory one day. And so, hey, what are you guys doing? We're talking about this idea for an incubator, and we're working on a startup. Well, you guys get it going, we'll put you in. And the next week they're there again, and it went on like that. And it turned out that they started the incubator. This was, Roy said 2010. I think we had those conversations actually in early 2009. And anyway, it turned out.
Which coffee shop was that, by the way? So we can all go hang out.
It was on 56 at Carmel Valley,
oh, yeah.
right there. So
that kind of stuff happens
here
too. It's not just in San Francisco. You get that here too.
It's surreal to see the stats, 1.27 billion, and it was just an idea at a coffee table in a coffee shop, just like EcoATM, and it's surreal to see where it's gone. So the first lesson in scaling your startup, go into EvoNexus. Yeah. And then contact TiE.
Just related to that, by the way, I have to thank Mark because there was no room for us to go in, and we were the company that went into their space. So I'm still trying to follow him as we exit in stages.
Yeah, and basically I took their entire space because
it's got good karma.
We are basically right now in the old EvoNexus office, so it's all demolished and it's a brand new space. So that's why I say, we took over all the entire space. So I guess I'm here to listen to what Mark has to say so that way I can actually scale my startup. So we'll see, and as well you can. I'll probably start with the hook to Rory Moore. Rory, thanks for your email because he just sent me an email with an introduction because we are building what we call Ira cities. So that's what EvoNexus will bring to you. He's standing out there behind you, but at the same time, he just sent me an email 3 minutes ago while we were talking here for the introductions, and that's what EvoNexus will bring to you. Well, Ira, we basically bring in best-in-breed technologies, anywhere from artificial intelligence to augmented reality, as well as high-speed network to fundamentally provide what we call a technology service for blind and visually impaired people. So think about it as vision in your pocket for people who cannot see anytime, anywhere in the world. Where we are. So 6 months ago, we closed our Series B financing. So thus far, we raised around close to $16 million. It's not enough.
Total, or is that in Series B only?
Now, Series B was 12.5. So in total is around 16. I was saying it's not enough because we are going after next round of financing starting in May or June timeframe.
Very good. Thank you, guys. So, the notion that getting startup off the ground is hard and getting funded is hard. And so now that you have your money, why is it so hard to scale? What's a big deal? You got the money, you got the resources. Why is it so hard to scale?
Should I go again?
Have you ever seen the movie A Million Ways to Die?
Million Ways to Die. Okay, that's one way to put it.
So let me tell you a story. It's not hard to scale. It's hard to scale right? So at the right time. In our case, for example, we scaled. We had a major deal probably 3.5 years ago, a year and a half of negotiation, crown jewel of a partnership in our core space. They started a whole new practice around our platform. And we scaled. We did our Series B and we scaled, and we were ready to make a great first impression. And they were training 440 salespeople on our product and launching nationally. Well, somewhat unbeknownst to us, somebody decided at the CEO level, maybe the board level, and it was a private company, that this business wasn't going to be too profitable for them, that they're doing just fine without investing. And so they decided to change their policy and change their business plan. We found out about 2.5, 3 months later, even as we were scaling. So that was a major challenge for us because the entire business plan had to change. It had to change from scaling to go conquer a market with a partner to really reducing our burn and essentially going after the next big deal. So that's one example of how one of a million ways you can scale wrong or scale in the wrong direction, and not your issue even, but adjusting might be the biggest way you can stay alive.
I think the one way to think about it is that when you scale from two guys at the table in the coffee shop to a bigger thing, there's distinct phases that are your daily activity as a founder or whatever your role is, changes completely from the first day to the second phase, and then again to the third phase, and again to the fourth phase. Your daily activity is totally different. And so in a sense, you're inventing new technology, you're innovating. You may be innovating a channel, not just a product, and a new way to market, and all these things. So by definition, a lot of it is OJT, it's on-the-job training. And so almost nobody's seen that whole spectrum of change for whatever you're doing. And so, and not many people can make that. There's notable exceptions, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and so on. But making that, if you're really good at the beginning phase, you're not really good at some of the other phases. And so making that transition through those phases, not just as an individual, but as an organization, is really challenging, and it's difficult. And it requires you not to know the answer, but to go figure out new things all the time and learn and seek out advice and so forth. And that's hard to do when your hair is on fire and you're...
So talk a little bit more about how that role changes for an individual, and how did you make that transition, if you did, or if you didn't? Maybe you can just label what those, in those different phases, what that role becomes.
At the coffee table, it's all divergent thinking. You're thinking about, innovation and how you're going to disrupt things and ideas, and you're brainstorming, and most of it's terrible ideas. At the end, you're trying to make the whole organization converge on executing on this thing operationally, and sales and all this other, all running a company, and it's a different thing, and it requires different thinking and different organization of the company. So just to describe a little bit of the phases, one, and I know this isn't really crisp, but one is ideas, and let's go test that, and will the market care about this? Does it scale big enough? Is it a good idea? Does the capital care about this? Can we raise capital? And as you scale, I'll give you an example, EcoATM. When we had 20 kiosks, we started with one and then we scaled to 20. Every employee in the entire company knew the number of that kiosk, they knew the location, and daily they knew all of the stats and how it did and where it was located and what problems that kiosk had when it broke and what were the problems. Everybody knew it. After 20, all of a sudden, your mental inventory breaks, and you have to go to your brain prosthesis to some tools. So you go to spreadsheets. And then as you scale, spreadsheets don't work anymore. You need new tools, and you need other stuff. And then that breaks, and you get to 1,000 kiosks, and so you have to constantly reinvent your thinking, the way the organization communicates and has meetings, and what tools you use. And so you go through the distinct phases, and you have to recognize what those when they come. Or you're going to suffer.
So the audience may not know about EcoATM, so maybe give a 30-second pitch what it was.
There's, I don't know how many now, 2,500 or so in the wild in the U.S., most states, mostly in malls and grocery stores. It's like if you've ever seen a Coinstar or a Redbox machine, it's similar. It's reverse vending. It gives you money, but you take a phone or other portable electronics, and it uses artificial intelligence cameras, electrical inspection, and it can identify it and grade it and find a best price on the secondary market and present that to you. If you accept it, it bends it inside and pumps out cash.
And so you founded that company. You had raised 3-4 rounds of funding.
We ended up raising 72 million. 40 was a big chunk.
40 million, yeah. And then you exited that company in 2013?
Yeah, for 350 million.
350 million. So that's a huge exit. Yeah. So that's why I can see why Kian wants to follow in your footsteps.
That's why I'm sitting here.
Thank you. Suman, tell us about the challenges of scaling you're facing. You're in the midst of it, I think.
Yeah, I guess you can call that. Yeah, sure. We are in the midst of it. I guess for me, scaling is about execution. Yeah, sure. You got your money. Now it's about investing the right money in the right places. And if you make bad choices, obviously that money is gone. So people say cash is king, cash is king. So I think one of the biggest challenges itself is managing your cash, right? How can you keep managing your cash, but at the same time go above and beyond on what you promised to our, series of investors? So my fundamental philosophy is always undercommit and overdo, and that's what we've been doing as a company. And we have set milestones, and then you want to overachieve it. But when it comes down to execution, you may be hitting the challenges that you may not, foresee ahead of the time. So I guess proactively looking forward for the challenges and reacting to it, coming up with the new business models. I think it's all part of the scaling. So I think it's
coming up with new model in this stage, in scaling stage.
Yeah, right. I mean, you probably have some sort of a model that you have proven in your Series A or earlier seed stages of financing, but for the scaling, obviously that may not scale, right?
So tell us an example in your business. How does that work?
You're touching some of the passionate topics for me. So, originally we started with what we call a simple subscription model, right? So our customers who are blind people basically subscribe to our service. They pay anywhere from $90 to $320 a month. Now, I guess most of you can imagine 70% of the blind population is unemployed. So affordability is always a big challenge. And for us to scale, we got to tackle the problem of affordability. So one thing we started was a concept called site access. And basically, by definition, we create a geofence around any building, organization, stadium, retail shops, you name it. And the individual organization will actually pay for the service instead of a user paying for the service, right? So we rolled it out successfully in the last 3 months to Memphis International Airport. So what does that mean? Whenever a blind person using our service walks into Memphis International Airport, the airport will pay for the service. So technically, in the past 4 months, our business model has changed from selling to blind people to selling everybody. And in fact, QUALCOMM Stadium or QUALCOMM Hall should be a site access location so that way blind people can come here and experience the hall for free. So that's what we are doing, and we are building Ira cities. Pretty much anywhere you go, from the airport to Balboa Park to museum to zoo. Thank you. It's all free access for blind people, and you're basically splitting the economy into multiple different pieces, so that way it actually truly scales, right? Nobody's taking a big hit, and by the way, it's law.
That's great. So I think, Kian, you've had similar changes in business models as I was discussing this the other day with you, where you've gone from initial model to going after more institutions very similarly. Is that correct? I think you've evolved in the platform of platforms, if I remember the phrase correctly.
Yeah, I think from a value prop, we're amazingly similar. If I look at my first PowerPoint slide, it really is exactly what we're doing now, which is pretty rare because the market's always been there. But I would say that a lot of the learning that went into our scaling had to do with not just the business model change. It really had to do with adjustments in the business model. We're a subscription-based company. We're still subscription-based. But things around subtleties like if we can buy 5 years of subscription or sell 5 years of subscription up front, and a company can pay for that using a lease, and we give them more of a discount than the cost of money. Now they can pay monthly. We get paid 5 years up front, so the cash comes in, which is very valuable to us now over time, and everyone's happy. So that's an adjustment to the model, but you only really learn that when you can go in there and really listen on what are the issues, so how do you make it as frictionless as possible. From a market standpoint, we go from the hospital to the home, including senior living and home care, and those are very different challenges. If you go to a consumer, that model is slightly different, and it's a lot more simple, and as it should be, versus if you're selling, let's say, to a senior living home that's scaling around the country. So you have to be adjustable, basically.
So that's a challenge in terms of how you bring on the right kind of talent. I mean, in selling to individuals is probably more online and that sort of stuff versus selling to large institutions, enterprises. That requires a whole different level of engagement.
Sure.
So how do you manage balancing the talent, especially when you have resources that are constrained and you have to watch every penny?
So that's a great question. I would say a lot of our success, or I think any company's success, is more dependent on what we don't do than what we do. Mm-hmm. And that really goes to the answer to that question. So for instance, even though we're doing consumer defensively. We don't have budget or financials associated with it, and yet you can buy us off of Amazon, you can buy us off the website. It wasn't a lot of energy for us to set that up, but it's a lot of energy to say, we're gonna sell 10 million in the consumer market. That's a different focus, that's a different support structure. But every time I would present or others would present about our product, we'd get people coming up to us and say, you know, my neighbor's mom could use this, or my daughter could use this with her mother-in-law, whatever. So it's an easy way to get data and to make ourselves better and simpler, but not to lose focus, which is we're a B2B company. But the consumer will have a play, and a couple of the large partners we're talking about are channel partners that go in the consumer without us having to scale. And I would say the same thing on the other side of the bookend is hospitals. We're not a hospital company, but the company who's buying our technology is replacing their own software. So again, we stuck with our model in the middle, but the two bookends, we have partnerships and channel players that leverage the technology.
So before I dive into more questions, I forgot a couple of housekeeping things. For questions, we have a slightly different system. Most of you may have gotten a little index card. So write your questions on it with your name on it. And one of my associates will go through the questions and pick out the good questions. And then we'll have you come up to the microphone. I'll announce the name of who's ready for the questions, and you guys can line up for a microphone and then ask the questions. So sorry to make this a little complicated, but it'll be much more efficient, you'll see, and a lot of good questions will get answered. So instead of somebody monopolizing a microphone.
And then what's the prize?
Say again?
What's the prize?
Oh, yes, and the most humorous question and the most profound or insightful question, the speakers, the panelists here will pick them, and they'll get a bottle of wine. So make sure you carefully craft your questions. And then the other housekeeping thing I want to tell you is that at the end, we do have coffee and desserts, coffee, tea, and dessert. So please hang around, don't leave. You can network with speakers out there. And before we leave, we'll have a survey question that will be collected. And there's some prizes if you fill out the survey too, and those are the good prizes. So I wouldn't leave if I were you. There's some very nice restaurant prices that are being handed out. So make sure you do that. So with that, let me dive into the product a little bit. So we talked about the business model, but it sounds like as you're scaling up, your product needs to also change product or service offering, as the case may be. And how do you manage that? How do you deal with the challenges of getting all this input from the market as you're trying to sell? And you probably have MVP type product in the early stages that you've built out to scale, and then you suddenly get influx of requirements from enterprises or requirements from your institutional customers. How do you evolve your product and deal with those challenges?
You just do.
You just do.
You just do. Or you don't and you die. But no, it's a good question, but it's hard to answer because it depends on the situation. And
so tell us a situation when you had to do that.
I don't, this isn't to sound like we had, this was luck, but our original business plan, actually, EcoATM, almost everything turned out that way, believe it or not. I just made it up, and it was just luck. But it ended up working compared to all my previous startups. It almost came in like I was shocked. It worked, and the numbers were as forecasted and so forth. But one giant thing that we had thought about and built the features in, but didn't think it would be a big deal, was the stolen phone thing. We knew that it would be an issue, and so from the beginning, we put a thumbprint reader and required everybody to put their thumbprint. We had a driver's license reader. made them put their driver's license, and we had a camera that took a picture. So we had all the stuff, if it's the stolen, and we got the serial number of the phone. So if it was reported stolen, we could return it, and we could turn in the evidence to the police and so forth. So we built it in, and we thought it would be a useful thing to deter, and it was, to deter stolen phones. What we didn't realize is that we would become a political football on national TV shows, and kicked around as if we were causing the stolen phone problem. In fact, we were the very best player of anybody collecting phones. We were the only ones.
Actually got some bad press.
Yeah, we were the only
from
guys
it,
collecting all this and
no
giving.
PR is bad PR.
And we would transmit it overnight to every police organization, all the national databases, and only 1 in 1,500 phones that we collected turned out to be stolen. And we held everything for 30 days. That's a lot of capital to hold for 30 days. So that we could go find that phone and give it back, and then we would, work with law enforcement, and we would go train law enforcement how to use our system to find. We were the best players by far, but we got our teeth kicked in for about 3 years, municipality by municipality by municipality. So we ultimately evolved it to having a live person. There's a building right over just a few blocks from here with probably 25 people right now at EcoATM staring at a screen and watching every transaction live throughout the country, and comparing the face on the driver's license to the person, augmented by some facial recognition stuff, but it's still a human doing it, and making sure that somebody else didn't reach around and put their thumb on it instead of that person. And we ended up with 3 or 4 cameras and video, and we ended up training law enforcement across the country, several $1 million annually in, how shall I say it, donating to different causes so that the politicians in certain municipalities would see their way clear to not ban us. And so we had to get into politics. We ended up hiring the firm that did Hillary Clinton's 2008 campaign to
I'm not sure you want to admit that these days.
Yeah. It was, anyway, it was an unknown that was, we thought about it, we had no idea. And it ended up dominating a lot of my time for the last 3 years, and a staff of 10 other people.
So this must have put tremendous capital constraints while you're scaling. How do you manage that? I mean, you had enough investors?
Well, the upside was like we ended up on the Today Show, and they're trying to, well, somebody, could sell a stolen phone. They're trying to do a gotcha. 3 million people were watching. Are like, you can sell your phone? And our servers melted down, and we had the biggest day in the history of the company, right? So every time one of these bad stories, it was painful to me personally, because we would never have anything to do with stolen. We worked as hard as we could. So I hated that perception and that news, of course, but it was free, it was earned media, big time.
So actually, all 3 of your companies, I've noticed, since we're talking about free media and free advertising, you all have leveraged press and media amazingly well in all your companies. I think your company has gotten some amazing press in the last 3-4 months. I mean, I'm a runner, and I know a couple of blind marathoners and Ironman runners were using your services, and very nice articles were written on it. And I think you've gotten some nice press in the past. I think in the last couple of years, you've kind of quieted down. You don't need any more marketing or press, it sounds like.
Yeah, we literally are shutting down essentially core marketing and even prospecting functions. Cause
must be nice to be in a place like that where your business doesn't need any marketing.
Let me comment on that, because that's not by accident, I don't think. I think that the reason that there's so much earned media and the people like to tell these stories is because they do have a component of not just running a business, but they're doing good. And so everybody talks about giving back, and I think entrepreneurs are one of the most noble things you can do, because you create jobs out of the ether with ideas and wealth and products that people will gladly separate their hard-earned dollars to buy, and it's a noble thing to do. But, so I think even if it's not a do-good product for the world, it's still a noble thing. But Independa happens to be helping elderly people. He happens to be helping blind people. We were recycling. One of the biggest cheats in a startup, and I'll call it a cheat, it's probably not the right word, but that creates a tailwind. You have all this headwind, everything's uphill, right? The tailwind that you can create for yourself is to choose an idea that has a good story that people want to be involved in, that is easier to recruit people, good people. It's easier to get everybody on the page for that mission and go in that direction. It's easier to get press to go tell that story. And so if you're an entrepreneur and you're out working on ideas, all of them are good, but the ones that have the cheat are the ones that actually have this tailwind of a really good story that's helping people. It's not just a business story, but it does good.
How much did that play into you guys scaling? Because you know, it's very few companies that scale. I forgot to mention that earlier. You know, many companies do start out, but I think the statistics are less than 40% make it to Series A, and a lot less to Series B. And I think the Series D or E, there's only less than 5 or 6% that make it there. So how much of this, because we didn't pick the panel this way, by the way, just a coincidence that each of their businesses are in the business of doing some good for the humanity, right? As Mark pointed out. How much does that help you to scale? And if you had some other regular business not really helping, how much more difficult would it be to scale it?
Well, maybe I can comment on that. I think scaling is really a secondary byproduct of other things. Like if you're successful, you have to scale, whether you scale well or not, and so forth. So I don't think having a company that does good helps you scale per se. But I can tell you firsthand, to Mark's point, we have engineers that love working there because of what we do. And this is a very competitive environment. You could lose engineers very easily to someone who pays a little bit more. And that's just not in their DNA. Over the years, we have people who do support, and they believe in our mission. So I'm always fascinated and grateful for that. I think at the end, our job, my job, is to create shareholder value and be successful, and scaling becomes a part of that. But suddenly you see on the side that if you didn't do this, maybe you couldn't retain the same engineers, maybe you had to pay people more, maybe folks would churn more. So we're very fortunate because of that we've, over time, collected people who believe in what we're doing, and it helps. When you need this, maybe you do a downsizing, or maybe you have to adjust salaries for 6 months. I mean, you have to do some things like that over the years to get to success, and so that makes a big difference.
Anything else you want to add?
I agree with Kian.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about investors and board management and your role as a CEO. I think this is a hot topic usually this day and age. Many of the founders are trying to keep control of the company, and some big names have managed to do that, like Snap. Some big names like Uber has had a problem and has gotten rid of CEO. So did Apple a long time ago. How do you guys manage this whole dynamics of investors? Because now that you have investors, that you have a sort of a boss on top of you, so to speak. And how does that work in your day-to-day management? How does that help you or hurt you? And I think, Mark, you can speak about, you actually gave up the role of CEO at some point, and what was the rationale behind it? So maybe we'll start with Kian here.
Sure. So I would share that the board is really, really important for you as a CEO, as an entrepreneur, to consider who's going to be on your board. I have folks that I would categorize in break emergency class only. So I wouldn't take their money or want them on the board. And so you have to consider the person for starters. I've also used, other than the folks that I knew, I was privileged to work with a gentleman named John Carrington, who is the chairman and CEO of WebSense. And so he was my first investor and also came on the board. I didn't ask him to. He hasn't invested in other places that I know of, and I don't think he's on any other boards. So I was very lucky not to have to worry about knowing him. We worked together for many years. But the other person who is on my board is a phenomenal lady, very successful, highly regarded, and every indication was that she's terrific. But we both agreed, let's spend about a year as a board observer to see if we like each other, if we can work together. And after that, it was an easy decision for me, and fortunately for her as well. She joined the board. I've heard lots of horror stories that help me be very sort of religious about those guidelines, where you take the money, somebody comes in, everybody has the best of intentions, and then suddenly you lose a vote, or somebody's not talking to someone else on the board. We have very accomplished people on our board, but no ego. So everyone's there, and everyone, and no one's a pushover either. So my job is to create shareholder value. Otherwise, I shouldn't be there, and I should be. Mark was saying this when we met. If someone else can come and do a better job, I'm the first one to want that, and the board should support that. But I think as a board, if you can collaborate and reach consensus and not have egos, life becomes a lot easier, especially during hard times that you're going to have. So I would encourage you very much to consider who's sitting on that board, and it's like a marriage.
Yeah, I can speak to it. For me, you always are in this mode of proving out yourself to the board. And the twist in here is it's easier sometimes to think about what can board help you rather than you proving out yourself to the board. So it's the other way around if you just flip the equation, which is they do have responsibility in making sure your company is going right. So I almost always never get a question because I'm always pushing information to the investors and having them do work for you, right? So think about them as your people, and that's what I end up doing. And for what it's worth, they are the people who are going out and talking about your business. So for me, managing board is about looking at them on how can they help your business grow, rather than continuously in this notion of how can I prove myself as the CEO of the company on how the company is doing. So that's one difference. The other thing is, I have an interesting board too. I have to say this. For the fact that we are kind of a company where we don't fit anywhere, if you think about it, we have Lux Capital, which is based in New York, and they focus on artificial intelligence, drone, AI. So they look at us as a technology company that is doing good for sure. And then we have Arboretum. Arboretum is a medical device company. So they basically invest in companies from healthcare. And we are obviously not a healthcare company, but we get rid of people's isolation because now there is technology to get people out of the door, right? So that's medical devices background, Arboretum VC in Chicago. And then we have Jazz. So Jazz looks at us as a technology that enhances human potential. Because if you look at blind people, they are missing a sensory aid, and we are basically replacing that sensory aid using the technology. So they are a bunch of neuroscientists. It's all PhD guys who come with the neuroscience background. So if you look at our board, we have the most diverse board that I can probably ever imagine, and I think it's a good thing. It's a good problem to have because then you don't have group thinking, and you are always bringing in the perspective from healthcare, for insurance, from the technology space, from the neuroscience background, and I also have a biotech investor, which is Arch. So yeah, that's my comments on that question.
So we're going to run out of time. So Mark, if you want to quickly talk about the role of CEO and why and how you decided.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll tell that story real quickly. The strength of my game is not 10 of your hours of your 14-hour day staring at a spreadsheet of operational minutia. I can rise to that occasion. I can do it for a while, but it's not the strength of my game. EcoATM was going to be that game. And this startup just got funded as my 7th to have gotten venture backed. And I'm sitting on 4 or 5 boards now, and there's patterns that you see, and I've been through this, but EcoATM was going to be, there's lots of beans to count and lots of scaling and operational and building and manufacturing, and that's not the strength of my game. And I just spent about a year with Tom Tully, who is a really operationally focused guy and who loves minutia and can't get enough of it. And as took a company $35 billion public, and just loves this stuff. And so I had a sense, because this had happened to me before, that if I got this thing going and it got to a certain size, that my venture capital would come to me and say, hey, Mark, you're a super nice guy, and you're great for getting it here, but we're going to bring in this superstar from retail that we know. And I'd been through that, and that person usually brings a team of a bunch of people, and then pretty soon you're fifth on the totem pole, and the cap table's skewed, and it's not your thing anymore. And so I tried to be a few chess moves ahead. So I went, Tom Tully was a guy that all the VCs were trying to get to go run stuff. And he would pass their test, and he would be my guy. And so I went out and stacked it with an independent first, and then I got Tom. And so when the investors finally came in, we had 3 strong ones, and the independent was the guy that started Coinstar. So they weren't going to get rid of him. They weren't going to get rid of Tom, and they weren't going to get rid of me. And so I sort of cemented myself into place before it happened, and it worked. And it was a functional board. One of the things about boards is, so I hired Tom to be my boss, and anybody that's worked for Tom before, which I had, all of them came up to me and said, you worked for him before, and you hired him to be your boss?
He would say that in front of Tom, too.
I would say that in front of Tom, too, because he's a really tough guy, but he's fair, and he's driving it forward, and he's a much better CEO than I am, particularly for this thing. And so hire your own boss. It's not, I mean, for me, it wasn't about being king. It was about shepherding everybody's shares, and whether they bought them or common. Let's make this thing successful. Let's make this baby go. I don't have to be the guy in charge. And so that maturity didn't come until about 5 startups in. So, but if there's somebody better at the job than you, let them make you some money and everybody else more money than you would make everybody yourself. And so I got over that a few startups back, and too late for the first 4, but after that it's just bring them in.
Now
a functional board, by the way, is one that doesn't just rubber stamp and nobody. I had one where as soon as anything controversial came up, 2 or 3 guys would walk out with their BlackBerries and act like they were busy because they didn't want to have any controversy. And so a good board should disagree and have a vote every now and then and have it 3-2 or 4-3 or whatever. I've been through entire companies for 6 years where we blew $80 million and nobody ever disagreed about anything. How does that happen? So you need a board that can disagree and then walk away friends and you make good decisions. So.
Good. So audience, if you have questions, get them ready. I'm going to take a couple of minutes for a lightning round of questions. Okay. So I have lots of questions, but we're not going to have time to go through them all. So in lightning round, let's talk about culture, and these are 10-second responses, guys. So Amazon has the door desk culture to show frugality. Anything like that in your companies? Did you guys do? Start with you, Kian. What's one cultural value that you?
Well, I'd say 2. It's simplicity in our product, right? And it's integration. It's engagement and excellence in our delivery. So ourselves and our product, and everything has to always follow that.
At the beginning of EcoATM, before funding, and I was paying for it all, I actually made people stay 2 to a room in Silicon Valley. You can find a $30 hotel in Sunnyvale, California, downtown. They don't change the sheets very often, and it smells horrible, but I made people stay 2 to a room, and that sort of set the culture. Nobody came to me asking me for a foosball table after that.
Okay, Suman.
Well, always have your booze stocked up.
The what?
Booze stocked up.
Oh.
You never want to run out of booze in a startup. So.
Okay.
True, right? I mean,
who's your attorney?
That's what we do. Come on. It's a So I mean, in reality, I encourage mostly like the flexible environment. Rather than trying to force people to come, 8 to 5 o'clock. Basically, you have a project, you can get it done. You use your office as your home. And if you come to our office, I can give you a tour because it's like home. So that's. That's me, Devon.
Just one other quick thought on that might be helpful. So we always talk about effort versus output versus outcome. And it's really important that everybody understands the difference between each one of those, especially in a startup. So effort is the price of admission. There could be a lot of output, but unless you have outcome, you've basically wasted a lot of time. So that's really important for everyone to understand.
Yeah, just one thing. I mean, in all its seriousness, we do have something called 10x, which is...
So much for 10 seconds, guys.
You're still collecting questions.
Or 10x, 10 seconds, right? So pretty much every second that you spend, either it be meeting, either it be dollars, either it be time in a meeting, we always push for having a 10x return in that value, right? So every team member follows this fundamental principle. So that way, every penny that you invest, you get 10 cents back.
Sorry, I'm gonna go more. The
10 seconds.
The culture starts on the very first day, and you don't like set it a year in. It starts from the first day. My son's starting a company yesterday. He's got a 3D printer, and they have all the chemicals and stuff, and he was throwing it out in the trash. And I said, look, your environmental policy starts today. It's you, and don't wait a year for that. Don't throw that in the trash. Go handle it properly. So that now he has a 5-gallon bucket, and they're putting all that stuff, and they're going to take it to the dump when it's full. So, so all culture, and that's environmental, but everything starts from the first day, and don't wait to deal with that later, or make it form accidentally. Do it.
Best day of your scale up. Best day of your scaling phase. In your
best day?
Yeah.
I think it was. I mean, there's a lot of them, but I think LG's investment was really good.
Excellent. Yours?
Probably the EcoATM exit.
Exit, of course.
Of course, that's an easy one.
Let me think.
Oh dear, I have a lot of best days. I'll probably pick moving to a new office was good. As much as we love EvoNexus, we were, sitting next to each other, on top of each other. So moving into a new office was good.
Okay, best perk you offer to your employees?
A job.
The EcoATM stock options, they worked out well.
Okay.
Well, I think I already answered mine.
Best party you guys had in your company, for your company?
When?
How?
we have annual, we went car racing, actually. That was
car racing, okay. So you still do race.
No, it was a very small track.
We, on the EcoATM exit again, we rented a 100-foot.
Come on, you got to skip that story.
Actually, Rory did a perfect double backflip pike off the 3rd deck.
Wow.
Yeah, he was an Olympic diver, close to it.
Where did he go? He's gone.
Well, we had party 3 days ago on Friday at our office.
Wow.
It's serious, man.
Okay.
It was a company party because yesterday was Jan 29th, which is our 3rd anniversary of the company, for real.
Congratulations.
Yep.
Okay, so Jim, Matteo, Michael Alston, and Ibrahim, you guys are here. You guys need to line up to the mic. And then I'll go to a couple other, okay, best team moment, when team came together and did something phenomenal.
Best team moment is when we went out and upgraded a customer in like ridiculous weather, rural areas over a 2-week period, and they just loved what we did, and we worked out.
Awesome.
Oh, there's so many.
Pick one.
Skip me. Go to him.
EcoATM exit.
EcoATM exit. Yeah. That's probably it.
It's probably
nailed it.
That's it?
That's it. That's all I got.
Okay, let's see. For me, I'm going to pick a moment when my team sang a birthday song for me because I was not in the office, and they sent me, or they slacked it to me, which was sweet, I thought. It's pretty cool.
Nice.
Jim?
Okay, yeah, question for Mark. Just a few words that you'd use to describe each phase of your, development and scaling at EcoATM, and then what were the characteristics that you pulled from as a CEO that made you be successful at each one of those phases?
So the first phase I would say is the sort of idea phase and vetting it out, and this is a place where I think there's a lot of like patterns where startups fail, And one of those critical spots is in the beginning where you have the idea, and of course it's your idea, so it's the greatest thing in the world, and a lot of people will just run with it. Well, most people get an idea and they don't do anything, and they see somebody else does it later and they say, that was my idea. Real entrepreneurs go out and at least they attempt it. And, but most of those fail because most of them seem like a good idea, but there's some flaw in it, some fatal flaw. And most entrepreneurs need to spend more time up front beating up the idea, researching it, you know, all the lean startup stuff, MVP, and getting there before you go ask Aunt Martha for money. And sometimes you can't do that. You need capital to build a prototype. But more time and more seek out critics to call your baby ugly and beat it up and listen to those critics and seek out people who know and listen to it and abandon it and find some other idea. Don't waste Aunt Martha's money and all your time you know, on a dumb idea that you could have found the fatal flaw first. So that's the idea phase. The second one I'll call the conundrum phase, because every startup has at least one conundrum. The most common is, I can't get funding until I get a prototype, and I can't get a prototype until I get some funding. And so you have to figure out how to break that. And then the scaling stuff happens after that. I won't define those, but I think to answer the second part of the question, the beginning part for me, when I had confidence in the idea and I had everybody try to call my baby ugly, I couldn't tell anybody the real fatal flaw. I did pitch 59 VCs ultimately that said, 58 that said no, and we finally got funding. And all of those guys told me it was a stupid idea, but they didn't tell me why. They just said, I don't want to fund it. And it's not a VC fundable idea or you know, whatever. But they didn't tell me the fatal flaw. I got the Coinstar founder, Jens Molbach, to listen to me. I stalked him basically and hunted him down. He says I stalked him. I don't know if it's that bad, but when he couldn't throw up on the idea anymore, he kept picking at it. It's like, wow. And he eventually invested and joined my board. And that was a critical moment because it put a sparkle on the thing. And then the conundrum phase was we just had to go build 20 kiosks and prove that it worked. And this stupid idea that everybody thought was a dumb idea, go prove it works. And that's how we broke the conundrum, just the old-fashioned way. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, it did.
Okay, next up, Michael Alston.
So, gentlemen, tell us the role the Reid School of Management played in your companies.
Good question.
Well, I started mine at Reid School of Management. So my business plan was for 2 credits at Reid School of Management. So literally, I spent my time doing market research for 2 credits at Reid School of Management. But hey, it turned out to be a good business.
One of my best, I guest lecture there, and I was just starting EcoATM, and I told my story in one of the classes. A guy came up to me afterwards and said, I got to do my graduation project. Drew Spaventa, and he got a team together, and they actually took a kiosk and put it on campus and ran it as their senior project. Turns out campuses weren't that great, but it was a good project for him. Ended up hiring him. He was my best hire ever. He's now gone on to be a VC, and he's now CEO of a genomics startup, and he's raised $30 million in 18 months or something, and right out of Reid. So it's great.
Yeah, I have one more thing. I have 5 people from Reid School of Management at our company as of today. And I just put together a photo yesterday because 3 years ago, on the same day, we were sitting in Reid School of Management doing some coding. And then 3 years later, I had 40 employees in a nice office next to each other. So it was really cool to see that transition.
Thank you.
Before we go to Ibrahim, Edward Remias, Rajan Rebello, and Rajani Roshan. You guys can line up, and then next questions from Ibrahim.
Thank you very much for the program. If you have already formed your idea and you have these products that your long-term goal is to have a highest quality product in that area, let's say some medical devices that helps the senior people, but how you kind of break it to the smaller milestones that help you to know when you should scale, and these milestones to be realistic so you can meet it. So if you can give me some comment.
So in our case, we engaged a company called IDEO, probably the best design firm in the world, and my question to them was, how come 30 years into this, the brand for technology for elder care is still I've fallen and I can't get up? So we did a project together, and I paid them out of my own money. But at the end of the day, all the credit goes to them in educating me in what's needed to be differentiated and what really down to the wireframes of the product. So that was a great shortcut for us as a company and for me, because I didn't have the expertise. I just knew there was a market, but I knew I didn't know a whole lot. And so they reduced that gap down to the wireframes of the initial product and the features. And the rest of it was really getting market feedback and understanding things and getting focus groups and getting prospects and investors. And it's really about taking the next step forward. Unlike climbing Mount Everest where there's a path, I think in our case, we know we want to go to the peak and we have to get there. And there's a good idea, this is the better step versus that. But as long as you're going up and you're working your way, it kind of works out.
Yeah, so the way I think about it, one is, what is your next big thing that you cannot screw it up, right? Like literally, so we cannot screw up our valuation for our next round. So all our milestones that are geared towards is towards growth. So majority of our milestones almost always change every 6 months or so, because our target of what's next big thing changes every 6 months.
Okay, next up is Rajan Rabela.
Hi. So one of the things you talked about early was how being an entrepreneur and scaling is about constantly changing your perspective and how you view your own company. And so one of the questions in my mind was, how do you go from developing an idea to being primarily a tech person and working on the idea and working on the product to then all of a sudden being thrust into this position of learning how to sell your product and becoming a salesman and addressing your own biases of being a tech person and then kind of shifting gears and then competing in a space where you may not be qualified to do?
So I think the most underutilized weapon in scaling company is if you don't know what the answer is, and you usually don't. I've like 7 startups. There's still a bunch of things I don't know, because if it's been done before, it's not a startup. Somebody's already doing it. So there's always, it's by definition, a lot of new stuff. And so if you don't know what the answer is, go find someone who does, and be really selective about that, not just any mentor or anybody that might know. So the question I ask myself, and I evolved to this after 4 or 5 startups, is who is the Elvis of this particular topic? So in your business, you got components. You got the technology, you got the market, you channel, all these things, IP. You have to become a world-class expert if you're a CEO or an executive in every one of those. That's a hard thing to do. So how do you do that to go run this thing? The cheat, again, it may not be the right word, but is to go like Jens Molbach, the guy that founded and ran Coinstar and took it public. He's the Elvis of kiosk. He doesn't know anything about mobile phones. He doesn't know anything about some other stuff in my business, but he knows that. How do you do that? I hunted the guy down. I stalked him. I pretended I was going to be in Seattle and showed up in his office and waited all day until he felt sorry for me. And I went in and he said, I got 10 minutes. He ended up giving me 2 hours and then ultimately, but he knew a bunch of stuff in his brain that I needed in my brain. I also needed to know about the refurbishing of phones market. I didn't know anything about it. So I hunted the people down on the internet, LinkedIn, and I showed up and talked my way in and looked around, and they told me about their business. And I did that for each of those components as I went through the business. And pretty soon, maybe a year and a half, Now I am a world-class expert in all of those things. I've taken all those things from their brains and synthesized it into mine. So I think that's the trick, is the cliff notes are in somebody else's head. Go find them, and then further, don't just ask them, involve them as an advisor, as a board member, employee. A lot of my employees came from that. So build your team of world-class experts in each component of your business, and they're going to be way smarter than you and make you smarter in the process. So.
If I can add to Mark's point, which is a great one, and he's being humble about this, but really the higher level trait, personality, I would say, is that failure is not an option. So what he just explained is, no holds barred. I'm going to do what it takes. I'm not embarrassed to sit in front of someone's office for a whole day. And so that's really part of it. Is if failure is not an option, you must find a way. And smart people, creative people, determined people find ways to do that. And the corollary to that is, if you beat your head against the wall once and you leave, you're a quitter, and you shouldn't be an entrepreneur. If you beat your head against the wall 99 times and it's not moving, then you may be an idiot. But so you have to believe, and maybe for an entrepreneur you move that scale to like 299 or 399, but ultimately you break through.
There is a fine line between a persevering, overcoming, hardcore entrepreneur and a totally irresponsible jackass, and it's you really have to come right up.
Depends on the outcome usually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, guys, I'm being told to bring this to close, but I'll take 2 more questions, but we have to make it quick responses.
Let me make an announcement over here. So we are going to collect the comment card, and there's a raffle, like a lot of money and giveaways. So while the questions are going on, I'll
so these 2 questions, you fill out your comment cards, and the next question is from Edward Remias. Oh, okay, there you go.
Hi, thanks for the panel. I think this was very inspiring and very informative. So I come from an engineering background, and I look at how you scale your engineering team. And as the engineering team scales, how significant is the process and kind of having that switch from the 10 guys in a garage or an EvoNexus doing stuff to the 40 to 100 people working together to get a product, right? When do you make that switch, and how do you make that determination?
Quick answers, guys.
Find the right leader who can do it.
Yeah, exactly.
You have John Beam yesterday, and
yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, engineers don't necessarily get inspired by the marketing guy or the sales guy or whatever. They're going to get inspired by the guy they're going to work for. And if it's a really good leader, engineer, VP of engineering, start with that and let them go do that. And maybe you're that guy, and so I'm not helping you out much, but you have to inspire people, and they have to believe in the journey and be able to go home and tell their wives, kids, or husband, and they have to be inspired by it. So inspire them to your mission. And again, if it's a noble one, it helps.
Okay, last question. Rajni Resham, is it? Sorry.
Hi, no, that's okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for your time. It's been very insightful. My question was maybe to Mark, but anyone, of course, everyone, I'd like to hear from you. You mentioned that while you start, and in the beginning days, you start up with trying to make things work, and you have to be resourceful and scrappy, and of course, but then you slowly start moving towards a standardized process and write things down, and then you go to Excel spreadsheets, and then you go to a database, and so on. So it's very important, of course, to have processes and tools in place. Now, having had this experience and a number of times, of course, for you guys, would you say it's worth keeping in mind the growth and the scale so that you start investing in some of the tools and processes earlier on? Now that you have this, in hindsight, would you advise starters?
Yes, it's better to, with experience, you can anticipate before it breaks. Unfortunately, most of the time it breaks, and you go, how do we fix it, right? But it's better if you've been through it, you can anticipate when it comes and put that stuff in place. But tools change too.
Of course.
And processes change as well. But experience, if you don't have it yourself, make sure somebody on the team does and listen to them and help them anticipate that. have them help you anticipate that stuff in advance, so it's in place ahead of time.
So it's important to have mentors who have been through the cycle before.
Exactly.
So I don't think there was any humorous question here, but you guys got a hard job. Pick the two winners here.
I had one more.
Oh, you.
There you go. He's the winner.
If you make it funny, you get a bottle of wine.
There you go.
I think you just did it for me. But I actually had a question on kind of more leadership, but when you bring in more, I guess, higher level talent, how do you make sure that doesn't affect the already set dynamic of your culture when you have kind of like a startup vibe and you're bringing in talent that is more knowledgeable in certain areas? So how do you not let that affect the already created culture?
I mean, I think in some ways you want it to affect the culture if it's the right effect.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you want to have the startup culture, you know, the fast boat versus the big ship, and you want to maintain that as long as possible. But, you know, process is good, and if you bring in, you know, people that have those ideas, as you scale, you need new people with different kinds of talents. Not everybody's good at the beginning phase, and not everybody's good at the middle or the end, and you need the right mix. And you got to recognize when certain people can't scale, and you got to replace them.
Just a quick note to that is, if you love your culture and it's working, then you have to think about that when you're bringing that person in, not the other way around. So if you bring somebody who's totally not going to fit your culture, that could be a clash. But on the other hand, if your culture needs improvement and you can bring someone with, you know, the type of input that would help with that, then that's great.
Cool. Do I get the wine?
That wasn't funny. That wasn't funny.
Okay, so guys, pick which question. Pick two questions.
There was a question for me a couple ago about the on-the-job training and how do you go find...
I forgot the questions.
How do you navigate that?
I think, how do you transition from being a technology person to being a salesman? That question?
No, not that one.
Not that one? So I don't know. So who asked that question? The audience know?
Can we just do it randomly? Can we pick one?
Yeah, we can pick them. So
they were all good.
They were all good. So we'll give one to Reid School. Where's the Reid School guy?
2 wine bottles because we have no comedians.
Michael Alston. Michael Alston here. There you go. So we'll get Michael Alston and then Edward Remias. So there you go.
Very nice.
Enjoy the wine, guys. Okay, so any closing comments, any final thoughts?
I can make one comment for the previous question that was only directed to Mark. It was around processes ahead of the time versus being flexible. So one of my philosophies is sometimes you got to let the problem come to you rather than trying to over-engineer stuff. I mean, a simple example is, we do have, sort of plans and minutes and so forth, but we don't have any restriction on how many minutes individual people use. I guess long story short is sometimes it's okay to invite problems in your environment because you don't know what the problems are. So do not over-engineer and focus on the product. That's the last comment.
Oh, yeah.
Start your scaling by going to EvoNexus and TiE to begin with.
Hey, Rory is not
Thank you.
Jay, when you come up with your financials, those are the only numbers you're guaranteed not to hit. So, and you could be higher, you could be lower, but the process itself is really valuable, and going through the process and understanding things over time makes it better and better.
Thank you. Please join me in thanking the panelists. Fantastic job, guys.